I gave you all I own, put you on this golden throne, but I'm a little stronger now.
What's up, Ego Hackers? Welcome to the show. It's the CS Joseph Podcast, and I'm your host, CS Joseph. And yes, today's question is, how can an ESTP woman find happiness? I mean, is that a thing in Western society? Really? I don't know. Who knows? Yeah, ESTP women have it like super mega hard, very hard. A lot of people don't realize just how hard they have it, but given that they are an ESTP, which is the most masculine of the 16 types, even though they're in probably the most feminine temple in terms of their temple, which is the soul temple that worships at the feet of extroverted intuition, which is the most feminine cognitive function in my opinion. And at least feminine perception function, because it is the perception function that's the closest to the yin, basically. So like a yin and yang equilibrium, it is the yin, so it's a very feminine function as a result. But ESTP women are the most masculine of all of the women out there, and in Western society, it really sucks to be them. And especially if they are subconscious developed, so they are closer to the objectification aspiration pull from their temporal wheel or their temporal pyramid, as we do call it in the journeyman members area. If you want to become a journeyman member, go to csjoseph.live/members, and you can become a journeyman there. You get access to many seasons of premium lectures behind our paywall, as well as 2 years of season 18, which is our live lectures, as well as years of our cutting edge podcast, which is 1 episode a month. I do 12 cutting edge episodes a year for 1 to 2 hours each, and we just keep going, and we talk about the cutting edge things that are happening with the science today, which is pretty dope. So yeah, you might want, and plus there's like discounts for coaching as well. So check that out, become a journeyman member, and you can gain all those benefits. So yeah, ESTP women have it really hard because they are super masculine, and because of their cognitive origin of intimacy and connectedness. They need intimacy. They need to feel connected to other people. ESTP women, out of all of the 16 types, struggle with jealousy the most. Jealousy is defined by wanting what other people have, or basically saying to other people, especially other women, saying she doesn't deserve that because she doesn't perform as well as I do. That's basically how the deadly sin of lust actually manifests within an ESTP woman. It's also why ESTP women, in as much as INFJ women, have the highest body counts sexually out of all of humanity, basically. Unless, of course, they're really close to their living virtue of chastity, then they end up having the lowest. But that's extremely rare, especially in Western society. It's kind of interesting. Like, I've had an ESTP woman recently tell me, she's like, Chase, you know, honestly, like, I do have a really high body count, and it's definitely something I am ashamed of, but honestly, no one even told me that a woman's value is tacked on to how many men she's had sex with. And she's like, no one ever told me that was a problem. No one ever told me that my value would go down if I had sex with more men in my life. I had no idea that that was a thing, you know, as a woman. And you know, if you guys want to like figure out why that is, you might want to read the Rational Male books by Rollo Tomasi, or just listen to the Fresh and Fit podcast, or basically like it's obvious, you know, women end up you know, having a lot more emotional baggage, and end up comparing sexual performance between men in their mind, and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. Plus, you know, you also have the statistic that if a woman has 3 or more partners, sexual partners in her life, she is 80% more likely to end up divorcing you as a man. And so it really especially sucks for ESTP and INFJ women, especially, but most of all, ESTP women in Western society, because at TI parent, they're lacking in input. If no one ever told them, they think it's okay because an ESTP's FI trickster ends up making judgments on terms of what is okay and what is acceptable based on like, well, everyone else is doing it, so it must be okay. They often utilize that as their like #1 excuse in life to actually get through life. which is really frustrating. And, you know, and ESTPs, like, in general, just, they all have this thing. It's like, well, if other people doing it, then it's okay for me to do it. If you're doing it, it's okay for you. It's that Templar mirror that they use. Sometimes they use it maliciously, where they're like, hey, you know, your bad behavior means I'm excused. I get justification to behave poorly myself, which is completely wrong and bullshit and not really how they should conduct their humanity at all. And ESTPs already feel soulless, basically, and that can become a serious problem. And, you know, ESTP women also end up becoming conditioned by societal programming to, you know, be that strong, independent woman who don't need no man. They end up being sucked into being like career women, and as a result, they're also super hyper masculine out of all the 16 types, which means they kind of entirely lack femininity, and as a result, they're just not really attractive to men, especially men in Western society. They're just not really attractive to men at all. I mean, men will absolutely have sex with them, but literally an ESTP woman, by most usual accounts, they're nothing more than you know, F buddies or just pump and dumps. Literally, they're the woman that, you know, that they look strong, they're super masculine, but they might look like dykes, but like at the end of the day, it's so easy, you know, to get with them if you just develop a little bit of rapport with them, or if you or if you have some familiarity with them and you keep having positive reactions around them. You just react positively to things they do, even the little things, in as much as the big things. And that ESTP woman it'll just spark desire in her NI inferior, and then she'll just choose you. She'll just want you, and then that's it. And then it just makes it super easy to just pump her and dump her and then just move on, because you and I both know that as men in Western society, there's no way in hell that, you know, in general, a man is going to wife up that. There's no way in hell a man's ever going to desire to actually start a family with that not very feminine woman who's basically incapable of submitting, who's incapable of listening, right? Who is very inconsiderate and constantly makes decisions based on fear, and, you know, fear of missing out. It's why ESTPs, especially ESTP women, have a serious spending problem. Usually, they're usually very terrible with their finances because they're so easily influenced by marketing and propaganda, and to take advantage of their fear of missing out. They're like huge FOMO people. You got to watch out for that, and that could be a serious problem. And, you know, and ESTP women, like they struggle with severe loneliness, and it sucks. It really, really sucks to be them. It really sucks, because they already don't listen to people, and they especially don't listen to fellow women who are trying to give them advice. You know, and it's hard for the mature feminine to be, you know, something that an extremely masculine woman would ever listen to. And it just ends up happening. And then as a result, ESTP women just, not only are they already ratchet by default, but they stay ratchet because they can't humble themselves enough to actually be willing to listen. And, you know, yeah, TI parent, they have TI parent, and they're always trying to be correct and always being, you know, right about things. And guess what? Yeah, they are, context by context or situation by situation, and only within recent situations or situations broken down into specific moments in time. But in terms of, are they right over their grand narrative of their entire life? No. And they make consistent mistakes, and they often forget their own mistakes. And because they don't keep track of their own failures, they don't keep track of their own mistakes, guess what? They are doomed to repeat them over and over and over, which continues to alienate them from people closest to them in their life, which means they end up becoming the loneliest of us all. You know, as much as ENTJ women or INTJ women or even ISTP women also really, really struggle with loneliness, the path of the ESTP woman is not a path that I would ever envy. It's also not a path that anyone should really ever actually be jealous of, because they have it rough. They have it the absolute hardest out of everyone on this planet. And, you know, anytime you see an ESTP woman who is actually not a single mother, or is a mother, or who is actually a mother and who is also married and they stay married, that is a miracle. It is absolutely a miracle, because statistically they're likely to become a single mom or not even a mom at all, and just become an old maid that no one wants to be around because of how alienating they are. And then their SI nemesis ends up becoming bitter as a result of those negative experiences that they themselves caused, even though they wouldn't ever really take responsibility for that, and all they want is absolution for it, but they caused it. And then that bitterness will grow, making them even more undesirable. And so as a result, the ESTP woman's demon function ends up staying a demon instead of actually having the opportunity to become angelic. When what they need to do in order to even remotely have an opportunity at happiness is that they need to change their demon function into an angel. That's what they do. The only way to do that is that would mean that they would actually have to stop going after the low-hanging fruit in life, and also stop avoiding pain in their life, and actually put in some effort every single day, constantly, and prove to everyone else that they are actually strong instead of just looking strong, because that's what ESTPs love to do. They love to look strong instead of actually being strong. Everyone is so intimidated and so threatened by the ESTP, but the ESTP is actually like one of the biggest pussies out of all of the 16 types, let's be honest. But they have to be putting in more effort instead of going for the low-hanging fruit. And as a result, that would make them more desirable. Their demon function is trying to teach the ESTP to become more desirable. And that is the key to an ESTP woman to find happiness, which means she would have to humble herself to actually know how to dress herself, to actually know how to put on her makeup. I've shared a bunch of memories, from my relationship with Railgun. She's an ESTP woman, and the struggles that she has to deal with on a constant basis. The judgment levied against her by her own family over her lack of femininity is it's constant. It's never ending. She has to put up with that crap all the time. And I remember even her telling me one day, STJs in my life would just tell me how to dress instead of, you, Chase, challenging me and challenging me to actually be creative, and then, and not telling me like what you expect, because for example, I'm the kind of man that likes to, know that my woman has enough skill to actually dress herself properly and impress me with her dress on her own without me having to direct her, throughout that entire process, but, ESTP women, they like to be told by their STJs, for example, because they're highly compatible with STJs, they're golden pairs and ISTJ, they like to be told by their STJs exactly what to wear and when, so that way they don't have to deal with the performance anxiety that they naturally have when they're within their INFJ subconscious, right? And when you tell them, hey, you need to actually, be creative and do it on their own, it really brings out the extroverted sensing inferior energy from their INFJ subconscious, which then that creates fear, and then that fear ends up to a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure eventually, and then they accuse you of setting them up for failure, when in reality you're actually just challenging them to grow, right? So that's just one example, and she's really grown through that, and she's really become a much better person, a much better woman in her life as a result, and instead of just being everywhere in her life in a jumpsuit or dressed in gym clothes 100% of the time. She actually has, Freddie wear pants and awesome denim, or really amazing tops, crop tops, etc. She's slimmed down heavily with her weight, and she's excellent, especially with her aesthetics and her dress, and it's really she seeks out her femininity, and she realized that she's gained more power in her life. She has gained more acceptance in her life, and she feels more connected to people and more intimate with people in her life, specifically because she has invested her effort not on the low-hanging fruit, but on the things that would make her more desirable, right? And another thing about ESTPs is that they are, I say that they're pussies, but it's because they're constantly avoiding pain. They're extremely avoidant of pain. They often don't actually face pain head on. And oftentimes they they constantly need to have something to tack their identity onto, like some kind of label. It's like, hey, it's like you're watching that amazing anime called Great Teacher Onizuka, and Onizuka is an ESTP, and in the story, like, his entire identity is tacked on the fact that he's a teacher. But then when he gets fired from his job of being a teacher, he gets in this huge depressive funk until he gets a job as a truck driver. And then he becomes GDO, Great Driver Onizuka, until his students fought for him and he actually ended up getting his teaching job back. And then he became GTO again, Great Teacher Onizuka, right? And Railgun right now is a GBR, Great Bartender Railgun. So they always have to have some their identity is tacked onto some label that shows or demonstrates their usefulness, right? And if they lose that label, they just completely break down because it's like, oh, I'm not useful anymore. What's the point in existing? And why ESTPs, especially ESTP women who run from pain way more than ESTP men do, ESTP women need to realize that the only way they're really going to truly have an identity and stop rejecting themselves is if they actually face the pain in their life and face it head on and are actually willing to admit audibly that they are hurting. Usually Soul Temple avoids pain by just not talking about it, and they always seem to bury that pain everywhere they go instead of actually talking about it. And if they don't talk about it, they can just pretend that it doesn't even exist so that they don't have to feel that pain anymore. But then eventually that pain will fester and it'll lead to an insane amount of bitterness, especially with the introverted sensing nemesis, and they will start judging the people that they are closest to and holding the people that they're closest to, even though they are innocent, but they will treat them as if they are guilty. It's really frustrating how that happens, and I've even witnessed that. I've witnessed that with like my ESTP cousin actually, and she married my ISFJ friend, and I remember her accusing him all the time of cheating on her all the time. And then, and I don't know if he ever did, but like usually when someone accuses somebody of cheating, if they're going to do the time, they may as well do the crime, and it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that sucks. It really, really sucks. And as a result, ESTP women, given all these problems that they have to face, they end up making decisions based on fear, which leads to those self-fulfilling prophecies. They end up making decisions based on guilt, which is funny because hypocritically they call everyone else out for being a burden and for being overly obligated to other people, because then you're going to drag me down with you because you're obligated to that person. But then they end up allowing themselves to be obligated through their guilt, and then they themselves become the burden, and they're constantly projecting themselves onto other people because of how external they are. And it's because they're having that internal soul temple struggle with identity, right? So here's the thing, though, like how do they find happiness? Well, they have to practice femininity. They have to, like, for example, if they're in a relationship with a man, they have to actually get to the point where they trust their man enough to lead and take the reins. And every ESTP woman who has had a breakup or has had a divorce or is a single mom or is alone right now, it's all because she did not trust her man enough to take the reins and to let him lead. It's because she did not let him lead. It's because she did not submit. That is literally the main reason. And the reason why she didn't submit is because she's not willing to face her pain. She's not willing to take on that role because she's just been so used and abused throughout her life because men just see her as just this pump and dump instead of like actually a human being. And no man in her life has actually treated her like a human being. So as a result of that, she ends up assuming that all men behave that way. And then when they actually do get into serious relationships, especially relationships where they have children with these men, they end up judging those men the same as all the other men that use them, and then punishing the father of their children in the same way that she would punish all the men that have ever, taken advantage of her or basically pump and dumped her and abandoned her that entire time, which is really sad. And that's usually because she's not willing to face her own pain and actually talk about her pain, because that would mean that she would have to admit that that pain is real, and then upon doing so be forced to actually do something about it for once, because then she'd just worry about being lazy, as a result. So That really sucks, so she has to learn how to let him lead, and that's an example of putting her effort in the right place, because again, the answer to this question, how can an ESTP woman find happiness? The answer really actually is she needs to learn how to become desirable. And she actually has to learn how to give other people's choices and freedom. And she has to learn how to use her own freedom of choice in order to create freedom for other people. That's what she has to do. It's so interesting because I'll actually share an example of that, from my relationship with Railgun real quick. But yeah, guys, don't forget, I got a new course coming out, Ego Hacking by Text. It's going to be available very soon for pre-order. I believe pre-order will be half price of the actual thing, so you want to get on it before its launch day, and on launch day it's going to be full price, so you're going to want to get your pre-order in. We're going to be making everyone aware of that and on our email list, also on Discord and in the Facebook group. Make sure you're getting in on it so you guys can get half price on it now. And what the course does is it teaches you how to type people by text messages or any text-based medium, as well as how to ego hack or social engineer them as well. So this will be some really nice social engineering content. We haven't done social engineering content in a very, very long time. The last time was season 21, which is years ago. Very, very long time ago. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to present to you Ego Hacking by Text, and it should be available for sale at the end of this month around Black Friday. And then also we'll be taking pre-orders up until then. So it is coming out very soon. Look for the link. It will be added to our link tree, and it will also be sent out if you are a member of the community. So just watch out for that link so you get it while you still can. It's going to be a fantastic and very fun course. So, the example I would state, from my relationship with Railgun is that she's looking for connectedness and intimacy. But, sometimes, I've noticed is that between her and also my two ESTP cousins, they all have this thing about dependence, right? Where they utilize dependence as a form of security. And, women very much care about security, and ESTP women especially. And so, for example, their golden pair is ISTJ men. And ISTJ men are, when it comes to their intimate relationships, they're perfectly fine with being, quote, dependent on their woman, per se. But when it comes to, for example, for myself, I'm super pragmatic. I am mega independent, and I'm probably a more pragmatic variant of ENTP because I am an unconscious developed, unconscious focused ENTP. So my INTJ and my ESFP and my ENTP sides of my mind are much stronger than my ISFJ subconscious side of my mind. And my ISFJ subconscious is affiliated, while the other three, which are stronger, are actually pragmatic. So it's kind of like I'm almost a triple pragmatic ENTP, which makes me hyper independent. And what this does is this ends up scaring Railgun. It scares her a lot because I'm not dependent on her. Because if I'm dependent on her, that means, I'm never going to lose him, or that means, he's dependent on me, which means that concretely he's always going to stay with me, or I will always have his attention whenever I want, because he's always going to come to me for this thing that he is dependent on me from. And that's how ESTP women typically, gain security, is by going out of the way to make their men dependent upon them. The problem is, though, is that is the complete opposite of letting your man lead. It is also the complete opposite of submission, because how can you submit to someone? How can you allow someone to lead you if you are utilizing dependence as a form of security? If you actually think about it, you as an ESTP woman is sabotaging your relationship by default by using the dependence thing. And that dependence tactic is a very masculine thing. Because if you were an ESTP man, yeah, sure, he'd make his SJ woman, very dependent on him. And guess what? She probably would be happy to do so. And it's okay, because that's a woman. And there's no problem with a woman being dependent on a man. No one has a problem with that. But guess what? With an ESTP woman who's hyper masculine, there is a problem with that, because it doesn't make any sense for a man to be dependent on a woman, because then all of a sudden the ESTP woman is just basically like his mom. And as much as they cry about not having that dependence, which causes them to basically be, that their mother, like it would be like Railgun being my mother, basically, and then how could she ever be like even sexually attracted to me or even attracted to me at all if that's the case? So then she complains about me not being dependent on her and being too independent, basically. But then at the same time, she also can't disagree with the fact that, because I'm so independent, that's what ultimately makes me attractive. And this comes from the book Mating in Captivity, talking about how, absence makes the heart grow fonder without sexual tension. And sexual tension comes from space, basically, because closeness destroys sexual tension. It destroys sexual attraction. So your ESTP woman guys out there will try to use this dependence tactic on you. Just refuse. Just be like, no. And then she'll feel really insecure. But hey, at least the quality of sex will go up as a result, because then you have a lot higher amount of sexual tension within your relationship, and that's super important. Make sure you're doing that. But again, like if she's trying to use that dependence tactic on you, well, then how is she ever going to be able to submit to you? How is she ever going to let you lead? Because if she doesn't submit and she doesn't let you lead, you're not really going to be interested in having a relationship with her to begin with, because she's going to become undesirable to you as a man. And I don't care what type of man you are. Ultimately, she will become undesirable. And then it's more likely that you'll end up splitting up and you have children, and then it leads to fatherlessness, which is even worse. And then she will have literally, through self-fulfilling prophecy, created that which she is trying to run from the most in life, which is loneliness. Because every ESTP woman is more afraid of loneliness than ever. But because of that fear of loneliness, she is forcing dependence on her by part of her man, going out of her way to force dependence whenever possible, and then claims that that dependence is what makes her feel intimate and connected, aka her cognitive origin towards her man. But that too is actually a lie. She doesn't understand that. She has to understand that the reality of the situation is that what makes her desirable, which is what will allow her to feel connected and intimate with you, her man, she needs to learn how to let you lead and how to submit to you and to trust you implicitly. She has to reverse her dependence tactic so that she allows herself to be 100% dependent upon you, her man. And that is how she feels connected to you. And that is the source of intimacy that she has with you. And that becomes the source of her security in you, in her relationship. And that, folks, is exactly how an ESTP woman can find happiness. Thank you for watching and listening to this episode, and I will see you guys on the next one. Enjoy!